We are recording this today, so no worries if anyone jumps on a little late. I will go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Welcome to our first webinar in our CMMC Executives Briefings series. Today's focus is on why it matters. My name is Leela Salim and I'm with FedMine. I'm happy to be joined today by Director of IT Services and CMMC expert Johnathan Lightfoot of Symbiont. Here's our agenda for today. After our presentation, we will have some time for Q&A. Please submit any questions that you have in the Q&A box rather than in the chat box. We will send out the recording and slides from today's webinar and all of the webinars this week on Thursday afternoon at the latest on Friday. So be looking out for that. Founded in 2004, FedMine is a business intelligence platform that analyzes and simplifies the increasingly complex federal business landscape in real time. We provide our clients the visibility they need into their addressable market of business opportunities. With FedMine, you can receive twice daily alerts based on opportunities and contracts within your addressable market. Here's our timeline of achievements. Like I said, we were founded in 2004. We were the first to successfully connect and receive authorization to download data on a daily basis. And most recently in 2020, we incorporated the GSA labor rates calc tool. Speaking of incorporating that tool into FedMine, we integrate from 17 different data sets, all done by our backend database technology. Some of our primary sources are FPDSNG, SAM.gov, USA Spending, GAO, Veterans Affairs VIP database, GSA, and more. Our main clientele are government contractors, both large and small, prime and sub. Anyone who has a need for federal spending and opportunity data can use FedMine. This includes federal agencies, PTACs, and various other support organizations. Monitor federal spending, build a pipeline of recompete and newly forecasted solicitations, dissect your competition, quickly view agency profiles, and much more. The beauty of FedMine is that you can tailor it to any market. I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, Johnathan Lightfoot. A Navy veteran from South Florida, Johnathan leads the IT services at Symbiont. He holds his CMMC certification and focuses his time on consulting and developing new business. When he's not in the office, you can find him hosting and moderating leadership and entrepreneurship forums online. Johnathan, it's all yours.
Thank you, Layla. And let's get started then. I want to thank everybody for attending today. As Layla said, this is our first day of our 3-day series on CMMC. The reason I wanted to do it in a 3-day chunks is CMMC, or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification that DoD is implementing, or has implemented, I should say, is rather large. And I've been to other CMMC webinars where they try to tell you, it seems like the whole story, if you will, in one sitting, an hour and a half sitting, and it's a bunch of information. And when I think about the majority of people who are not in cybersecurity, they may not even be in IT, that was it was almost like a fire hose. So when I worked with FedMine, Layla in particular, I said, this whole thing, CMMC, is important, but I think we need to really chunk it out and make it in more bite-sized pieces, which is why we divided it up into 3 different sections. Today, we're going to go over preparation type things, except it's mainly going to be around the history, where it came from, and why is it important, and why you, as a business owner or a business executive, should be looking at it now instead of waiting years. And down through the series, you'll see what I mean for that. So for today, or for this entire series, we're going to go over what CMMC means for your business, specifically if you are a government contractor, the things that you're going to have to think about and take into account as you continue going forward, especially if you're looking at this case, DoD contracts. We're going to talk about the timeline for implementation. I'm sure some of you have heard that, oh, CMMC is not going to be ready until 2026. That's kind of sort of true, not true, right? And we'll go over that, what that timeline looks like and where we're at currently and what is actually happening with the development of CMMC. I think you might be surprised. We're also, like I said earlier, going to talk about why CMMC is being implemented. Some of you might be familiar with the NIST SP 800-171, where that was a self-certifying accreditation that you would do on your own. However, because of recent and not so recent events, that DoD is starting to look more heavily at their supply chain and wondering initially if NIST was enough. So it wasn't. We're going to talk a little bit about what they have done to try to make it a system that's going to be more tolerable for them. And also we'll go over some other CMMC topic of interest to the business. As Layla said, at the end of today's session, or each session, we will have a Q&A period. I would ask, if you can, to try to limit your Q&A to the topic we discussed today. Like I said, CMMC is huge, and over the next 3 days in these 30-minute chunks, I'm going to try to cover all of CMMC. So if you ask a question after today about, let's say, what's a C3PAO, for instance, that's actually going into like our day 2, day 3 material. So it could become confusing to your fellow participants if you're asking questions that we hadn't even bring up yet. Naturally, we will be taking notes of all the questions. So if you do ask a question, I'll try to answer as best I can without giving too many spoilers of the rest of the lecture. Layla, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So first of all, what is CMMC? On the slide there, I'm not going to read it because it's not reading time with Johnathan, but it's a requirement that DoD is implementing to ensure the safety of the supply chain. It is estimated that this CMMC is going to affect over 300,000 DoD contractors, or what they also call as the defense industrial base, which is nothing more than contractors who provide services or products to DoD, or the Department of Defense. This is going to include both your prime contractors and your subcontractors. Each of them are going to have to be CMMC certified at some level. Tomorrow, we're going to go over the different levels, and I'll explain to you what they mean by at some level. You'll see some primes are going to have a certain level of certification, and they may only have maybe a lower certification level for their subs, or they might require them to be equal, but we'll talk about that more throughout the course. There are 5 maturity levels in total, and we're going to also go over a bit of, how to ascertain what's a good level for your organization. There's 5 different ones. However, there are different requirements for each of the levels. You can imagine that at the higher level, it's very stringent and a lot more controls are going to be subject to you, as opposed to the lower levels. And we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons. You might say, I want to go for a lower level. Well, here's the pros of doing that, and here's the cons, or vice versa. If I want to go for a higher, what are the pros and cons right now? The million-dollar question that a lot of businesses ask me when I'm talking to them is, how is this going to be relevant to my business? Some people assume, just because of the name cybersecurity maturity model certification, that it's all about cybersecurity. When they think about cybersecurity, they're thinking about hackers and penetration testing and everything else. That's not exactly true. And actually, on Thursday, or the last day, I'm going to tell you exactly what they're talking about. But keep in mind that overall, what DoD is trying to do is to ensure that the suppliers that they use for products and services, their networks are secure. And they're not looking at it from the typical cybersecurity companies that you may have heard of, right? So you talk to most cybersecurity companies, they're like, oh, we're going to do pen testing, and we're going to do this level 2 thing, and we're going to, no, that's not what they're looking at. What they're looking at specifically is, what are your policies, what are your procedures, and what standards are you doing to ensure that your network is safe? And in my experience, some of those cybersecurity companies, that's not their strong suit. Their strong suit is going in and doing those pen testings and coming back with, haha, we got you. Here's the file we managed to get a hold of. That's useful, except when you go through the whole CMMC standard, they don't even talk about pen testing. Also, as I said, it's about your policies and your procedures. The whole CMMC is built on your business processes and your procedures that they want you to take a look at and be able to look at it against the CMMC standard and figure out, okay, where are my gaps? What am I not doing? Or what do I need to tighten up on so that I'm making sure that I'm doing everything in my power as a business owner, as a business executive, to defend or prevent hacks or outside actors coming in and trying to take data or disrupt my operations and all. So typically when you're talking about CMMC and getting ready for it, you're looking at things like, what's my gap analysis look like, right? What's the standards say, where am I at, and where are my deltas? And then just strategically remediating those deltas as much as you can. Actually with CMMC, it's a zero tolerance. It's either a pass or fail type of evolution. So therefore, it's not a matter of lightning, it's a matter of just literally closing that gap is what they're looking for you to do. Your business and your employees are more than capable of getting yourselves ready for CMMC. Yes, there's a lot of stuff in it, right? Especially if you're new to IT or you're not an IT person, you know, when you first look at the standards, it feels overwhelming and everything else. And I'm going to talk about that later on about, you know, using other companies that can help you. But once you understand that the lingo, you know, CMMC, I don't want to sound dismissive, but when you look at the standard, you really can understand them. A lot of it's just best practices. It's stuff that when you read it, you're like, well, yeah, we should be doing that. You know, yes, we should have an access control list, knowing who's in our spaces, right? So, you know, that's one of the requirements under the access control is, you know, do you have a log where you're keeping a track of your visitors and things like that? Other things are in there too, but when you read them, like I said, a lot of them are pretty simple, but it's just a lot that you have to keep up with. All right, let's go to the next slide, Layla. So CMMC was not created overnight. It's not something that just popped up. If you look on the slide, you'll notice that as far back as 2017, we can see that there was some DFARS enforcement deadlines that occurred. But actually, just for your own trivial pursuit thing, CMMC kind of arose from the 9/11 Commission when they were talking about the different agencies and different security or networks that they were not able to talk or to collaborate effectively. That's really where you start seeing the history of CMMC really start to form. So it's been around for several decades, it's been in discussions and all, except it's been over the last year, 18 months that as contractors, we've started hearing about this requirement that DoD has. Currently, DoD has a proposed budget of about $9.85 billion for cybersecurity alone for this fiscal year of 2021. So you can see that the government has been active in looking for a way to secure the supply chain for a while. Part of that securing the supply chain, as I said before, is the implementation of CMMC. On the timeline of CMMC here, you can see the projected schedule of implementation across DoD contracts. Although we still have approximately 5 years before all contracts are going to be require CMMC certification, and just to make sure I'm clear about this, we're currently in year 2021, as you all know. You'll notice on the timeline it shows 2026 all contracts. So we know that by fiscal year 2026, every contract that DoD issues will have a CMMC level qualification, right? Which means if you want to bid on a contract in 2026, any of them, you're going to need to make sure that you have a CMMC level certification that will allow you to bid on it. Or else when they get to their qualifying questions, right, that review process, that's going to be one thing they're going to kick people out, right? If it says you need to have a maturity level 3 and you don't have a 3, let's say you have a 2 or a 1, and you try to submit a bid, it's going to get kicked out, right? Now, that's when all are going to be required. However, if you look here, if you go all the way back to 2021 right now, you'll see here that on the timeline, it says DoD's compliance with CMMC report is due to Congress. So one of the things to think about is this isn't just DoD saying we're going to implement this on industry. DoD themselves have to go through a process, a qualifying process for CMMC themselves, right? So it's like, they can't tell us, do this, oh, but we're not going to do it. No, they have to also be in there. But if you notice on the bottom, it says 15 contracts. What that means is in 2021, this year, DoD started implementing what's called the Pathfinder program. The Pathfinder program is basically a beta of CMMC. So in 2021, they are scheduled, forecasted to have identified 15 DoD contracts where they're going to put DFARS requirements in there that are going to have CMMC required levels in them. Currently, what they're saying is, I know that they've identified 7 of them, and I'm not sure if those 7 contracts have been released yet or not. I think they may or may not have, I'm not sure. But when those contracts come out, they're going to have in there a CMMC requirement. And what they're saying is, okay, you have to be CMMC level, whatever that level is going to be, by contract award. So you could bid on it prior to having your certification. However, if you are awarded it, when the award date hits, you should have that CMMC level qualification in order to do that contract. But there's going to be 15 for this year alone. And earlier this year, I want to say back in January or February, DoD did release a list of 7 initial contracts that they were evaluating to apply CMMC to. And then they still have to identify 8 more, right? You'll also notice in 2022, they're going to do the same thing, but they're going to do it for 75 contracts. In 2023, 250 contracts. 2024, 325 contracts. And 2025, an additional 475 contracts. You can do some quick math in your head, and you can see between now and 2026, there are going to be over 1,000 contracts that DoD is going to issue that are going to have a CMMC certification in them. Okay, why is this important to you as a business owner or a business executive, BD person? Yes, 2026, all contracts are going to have it. So you must be, if you plan to play in the DoD space and get contracts by 2026, for sure, you should have that, right? However, in the interim, we've identified there's going to be over 1,000 contracts that are going to come out that are going to have this DFARS requirement line in it for CMMC certification. To play that record through to the end, what does that mean? Well, if I said, we're going to wait till around 2024 before we start working on it, already 2021, yeah, there's 15. But what happens when maybe a prime comes to me and says, hey, Johnathan, we would love for Symbiont to bid on this work with us. Here's where we see you being a sub to us, right? We're getting our conversations. We're excited about it. Like, yeah, that's something that we could do. Love to partner with you on that. And at the very end, the prime says, oh, by the way, are you ready for CMMC? Because this contract has it. Now, I can't say, oh, wait, I thought CMMC doesn't start till 2026. And I'll say, yes, it does. However, this one contract, and you'll see here in 2022, this is one of the 75 that were chosen, part of the Pathfinder program, and you need to have that certification by contract award. So what do I end up having to do? I'm scrambling, right? I'm trying to get together the bid. I'm trying to run my business at the same time. I'm trying to get my company, my organization up and ready to go through a CMMC certification process. Right now, the last I heard, DoD has, not DoD, but the CMMC AB, that's the CMMC Accreditation Board, has identified 2 organizations, 2 companies that are qualified to do these assessments. There's only 2 of them. And if I remember right, they're both out of Houston, Texas. There's over 300,000 companies approximately in the defense industrial base. I'm not sure what's the end number going to be for organizations that will be able to do those assessments, but I can tell you they're not going to be 300,000 of them. It's going to be a very small number. So the other thing to think about is, although 2026 is our deadline, there's not going to be that many of these accreditation bodies or companies that can do these types of assessments. So what happens if I do wait until 2024, 2025? I might be in a traffic jam, right? I'm waiting for, I might be ready. I might think I'm ready for that assessment, but then they might say, hey, look, you're 6 months out before we can even get an assessor to you. So another reason why you want to start looking at CMMC early on to see what your business can do to get prepared for it at least, and so that then you're ready, so as soon as you are able to, you can move forward. Now, here's a little caveat on that. Currently, because of the Pathfinder program, they are testing this on different contracts, right? Like I said, by 2026, there'll be about 1,000 contracts. So those contracts that are identified are going to have priority. So unless you are actively bidding in one of these Pathfinder contracts over the next 5 years, you're not going to be a priority to get assessed. So right now there's 2 companies. We'll talk more about these companies. They're called C3PAOs. Those companies are concentrating just on the contracts that have these Pathfinder CMMC requirement in them. So if you're in a situation like today, hey, I want to get us ready and prepared, but we're not bidding on a contract, you can still approach the companies and say, hey, I would like us to be scheduled for a CMMC assessment. They're going to ask you, what contracts are you bidding on? And if it's not one of the Pathfinders, they may say, look, we'd love to help you, but we are obligated to taking care of contractors that are actively bidding on one of those Pathfinders. Once that gets done and those are cycled through, then we can start certifying companies out after that fact and all. Layla, what's the next slide? All right, so that went by pretty quick.
That's it.
So that's all for day one. I just wanted to give that background information to give some more clarity around the timeline. Are there any questions that have come through, Layla?
Yes, I think there's one open one right now. Okay. If you are a distribution company that sells to resellers that sells to DoD, will distribution need to be CMMC certified?
So are you talking about you sell like an off-the-shelf product or something?
That sells to resellers. I don't know.
So, okay. So to answer the question, the way CMC is written, if you are selling like an off-the-shelf product, right? So you are selling pins, okay? And no, there wasn't a requirement for you to have CMMC certification. When you say you're a distribution company, it's that can lead to different dynamics, and also I can't give you a positive on that. But if it's just an off-the-shelf product, no, it's not. However, here's something I didn't mention to you all about CMMC. If you are familiar with DoD wags the dog. When DoD does something with security, the rest of the government tends to take notice of it and starts implementing it, right? So to show that, DoD has already said, okay, we're implementing CMMC. I know that the GAO, General Accounting Office, they have said we're looking seriously at implementing CMMC. Also, Department of Homeland Security has said we're looking at implementing CMMC. Also, I got word that the state of Georgia, not even a federal agency, the state of Georgia has even said they're going to implement CMMC type requirements as well. So what's going to end up happening? If I have to look at my visible crystal ball here, I would predict over time, and I don't know what that timeline is looking like, but maybe over the next decade, you may see CMMC is going to stretch around the entire federal government and could get into the state as well as maybe even local government. But if you think about it, when you look at CMMC and I'm supposed to make sure like my company is secure, right? If I am a civilian company, I'm a government contractor, it's only going to be a matter of time before I start looking at my civilian contractors, suppliers that I use, and I might require them to be have some sort of CMMC as well, right? Because I have to make sure that my whole network is secure. So part of that's going to make sure that my resellers and my suppliers, all of them are secure as well. So this is, I'm looking at this as this is the snowflake that's going to end up becoming a huge snowball that it's just going to take up all of the industry eventually. Any other questions?
Yes, there's so many more.
Oh, goodness.
Where can we find a list of the projects in Pathfinder? The Pathfinder project.
I knew someone was going to ask me that. And if you come back tomorrow, I will have that list. I'll have a link to that list. it's they don't have the full list, right? It's almost like DoD is picking them at random. They're like, oh, we're going to do these, we're going to do this. There is an article that I'll get that link to you, Layla. You can put it in the chat tomorrow. It shows the initial 7 that they were looking into implementing them. And these were big contracts, huge contracts.
Okay. Do lenders who finance businesses who engage with the DoD need to have CMMC certification?
That depends. If you're handling FCI or CUI, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, then yeah, you're going to need to, because basically it's the safeguarding of CUI, classified or controlled unclassified information, and federal contractor information. So depending on where and how you're touching that, yeah, you may be subject to it.
Has there been any discussion around the cost per level for CMMC?
There has been some cost discussions, except, the whole thing is they just started doing they just approved the first 2 C3PAOs, right? So they haven't really run it through the ringer as to, well, how much does it cost to do this? And one thing I would caution, though, is when they talk about it, they're going to talk about the cost of actually going through an assessment, right? What they may leave out, and I hope they don't, but from what I'm seeing in the universe, it looks like they are ignoring it. They're not talking too much about the preparation work for it, right? So preparing for that assessment or that audit, that may be additional costs that are associated with it that I'm not sure they're going to talk about.
Do you know where we can view or monitor the contracts that are identified for inclusion each year?
No, I don't. I'm hoping that there will be a database someplace that they'll put out where they'll talk about which contracts are going to have them. But as I said earlier, it's almost like a pick and choose. Like at the beginning of the year, we knew that there were 15 because you can read the actual the regulations around it. You knew that there were going to be 15, but it wasn't until like January or February that they said, oh, here's 7 of them. And as I said earlier, I'm like, well, what about the other 8? I don't know what are they going to be? And next year there's going to be 75. Which one of those are going to be? It might end up getting to a point to where, the BD people are going through and reading these requirements and say, oops, here's one right here. I'm hopeful, and I don't want to speak out of class, Layla or Tisha, but I'm hoping that, with the powerful database that and functionality that FedMine has, that there'll be a tool for doing a search. Like maybe you'll do a contract search and I can see maybe there's a CMMC section or a level section. So you could say, does it have a CMMC requirement? And I'm looking for CMMC level 3 type stuff, right?
That is a great idea. We're going to have to figure out how to do that.
Incorporate that 100%.
I like doing ideas like that because as a former developer, I would be the one that you would have normally gone to. But now I'm like, yeah, this is a great idea. Go have a developer figure that one out.
Might just tell you to do that.
Find that table that does that.
What are you hearing for other non-DoD contracts and whether this will be a requirement in the future?
As I said earlier, DoD wags the dog. When it comes to security, DoD leads it. So if DoD starts it, traditionally other entities and agencies, they'll either implement that same thing or some version of it, right? So as I said earlier, we know that GAO is looking into it. We know that Department of Homeland Security is looking at it. I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing from DOE, Department of Energy, saying they want to do that. And also, if you remember the executive order that President Biden signed, about a month ago, if you read into that, he actually alludes to something like that. Like we have to make sure that our suppliers are secure, their networks are secure. And that was the executive order he released after the Colonial Pipeline disaster happened. So yeah, can I see this being a DoD, or not a DoD, but a government-wide, federal at least? Yes, I can. And like I said, if I looked into my invisible crystal ball, I would predict within a decade, you were going to see it very prevalent.
Thank you. This is another one regarding the Pathfinder contracts. It's just confirming there has not yet been an announcement about what contracts constitute the Pathfinder. Any idea of when, how we might learn about those? And I think you said you're going to touch on that tomorrow with a link, right?
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
provide a link of the article that identified the 7, that listed what the 7 initial contracts that they've had, they've
Right.
identified. They haven't, I don't know if they've applied it to the contracts yet, but this article talks about 7 of them that they said we're looking at applying them to. Um, until the Pathfinder program really gets up and running, your guess is as good as mine as to which contracts are going to have them in them. But I have seen what the wording is going to look like. So, and it's basically going to say, this level certification is needed. And they're saying by contract award date, you must have this achieved before the contract can be awarded. Or it's no start date. So at your award date, that you must have it by the start date, I believe. Oh, no, it's at the award date, actually, because I changed that wording. But again, I don't know yet. And I that's something that I have a Google search on. Actually, I have a Google alert because I'm waiting for something more comprehensive to say this is what's going to be in the Pathfinder program.
And
But the 7 I've
yeah,
seen are huge contracts. They're really huge. I think
ones.
the F-35 fighter jet program is in there. So these are not. Don't worry about the web. They want to change it. They want to have web development services. They're not looking at those contracts at this point.
And how long do you think it will take a company to get the CMMC standards in place to be ready for the audit to get certified?
That's going to depend on the company, right? So some companies may have started out really good. So let's say, for instance, it's a brand new company. They got, like, for example, Office 365 GCC High, and they started with that. They're going to have a less of a gap to deal with, as opposed to another company that may have had their own data center where they run their own servers on-prem to deal with. Also, it determines, they're going to be looking at your policies and your procedures. If you have had a very robust and you've been keeping up with, let's say, NIST 800-171, you might have it easier, right? Because NIST that is the basis of CMMC, and I'll go over that tomorrow. But it's a basis of CMMC, so you'll notice that the NIST requirements are in there, and they've added some stuff on there. So if you're there, it may not be as long. But if you're a company that maybe you are a small organization, security really wasn't a part of what you were dealing with, you might have a longer go of it. Every company is going to be unique and different, and it's going to be important that you get a pre-assessment done that can give you your gap analysis, and from there you can figure out what's your POAM is going to look like, or your remediation plan. Which, by the way, just if you attend over the next few days, you're going to hear me use the plan of action and milestones, POAM terminology. If you're familiar with NIST, a POA&M was enough to fill a gap, right? CMMC, a POA&M doesn't exist. They don't care about those. Either you pass, either you met, you didn't meet, or it wasn't observed. Those are the only 3 that are there. But I'll use that word, and when I use that, I'm referring to basically what's your remediation action plan going to look like.
Okay, and we're 3 minutes over, so sorry,
okay.
everyone, to keep you. Can we do a self-assessment for level 1?
No. With CMMC, it's all, you have to go through one of those 3 PAOs, C3 PAOs, to get an assessment. There is no more self-assessment with CMMC.
And then for that distributor question from the beginning, yeah, they sell scanners, tablets, things like that. So they were asking if then they sell those to a reseller who sells to DoD, would they need to have those products that they are selling certified, or would there?
As of today, as far as I know, no, you don't. However, keep in mind what happened with SolarWinds, right? That happened through the manufacturer, right? There was a hack that happened over there. I haven't seen anything official, but I know there is talk of them expanding that scope and saying, hey, look, we got to make sure that even our products that we're receiving are secure. So I would say keep your eye open and your ears open in case that does change, which, in my totally opinion, is I can see that changing. But as of now, no.
I think that does it for our Q&A. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Johnathan. We'll be back tomorrow for more CMMC executive briefing. Yeah, same day, same time. See you all tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern. Thank you so much. And yes, we are recording this each day. Just to sort of clean up everyone's inbox, we'll send one email on Thursday afternoon with all of the slides from the presentations and the recordings. So look for that on Thursday afternoon. Thank you. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnathan.
Rem-
Thanks.